The year is 1979. A film called Aliens opens in cinemas. Nobody knows what they're about to watch. And for the first 40 minutes, a woman named Ellen Ripley does what most people around her do. She follows orders and raises concerns nobody listens to. She's just a person on the ship. She's not the hero of the story yet. Then everyone on the ship starts dying, and one by one, the people around her stop making decisions. Ripley has to start filling in the space they leave behind. Not because she was chosen, and not because she was the strongest, but because she refused to stop when everything else did. And by the end of the film, she's the only one left, and the audience watched all of it and felt something that had nothing to do with gender politics, representation, or cultural agendas. They felt something simpler and older than all of that. Something about watching a person hold on when everything around them is letting go. Nobody called it a feminist statement. It was just true. And truth lends differently than argument. 45 years later, that character is still cited as one of the greatest in history of cinema by audiences that have been told they are incapable of accepting strong women. That contradiction is only the beginning of this investigation.
Winston, if an alien start bursting out my chest, I grant you permission to blow me to hell, man.
I'm not sure that it's coming out the way you're intending it to.
Blow me, blast me, whatever works. Potato, potato.
Good evening. Coming to you from my library, where several of the characters on these shelves never asked to have an agenda around them. This investigation is not about whether audiences accept strong female characters. That question was answered in 1979. This investigation is about what happened to the idea of them, and why the same audience that loves one version of this archetype turns their back on another, sometimes before they've even seen a single shot of the project. 6 years after Ripley, a different film opens, and this time it has a frightened waitress named Sarah Connor, who is told that everything depends on whether she survives the next 48 hours. She is terrified. She makes mistakes. She trusts the wrong people. She does everything a real frightened human being would actually do. And then she stops running. Not because of a speech, not because of a hidden power, but because there is nobody else who can help her. She crushes the Terminator in a hydraulic press, and the film ends on her face. Not triumphant nor relieved, something harder to name. Like a person who has understood something about themselves they cannot take back.
I'll be back, man. Me love those movies.
1976, the original Charlie's Angels. It starred 3 women who were glamorous, deadly, funny, and occasionally frightened. It ran for 5 years and left a cultural footprint that lasted 50. The 2000 film reboot made $264 million on a $45 million budget and earned a sequel. Neither version asked for permission to be what it was. Neither version needed the men around them to be incompetent for the women to be impressive. The strength exists on its own terms. Then in 2019, the same franchise attempted a third version with the same premise. To say it was a disastrous project is an understatement. The formula had not changed. Something else had. And the audience felt it before they could even name it.
Well, that's easy. It was cause Elizabeth Banks had run her big mouth.
In Japan, Ghost in the Shell released in 1989, revealing Motoko Tsunade as a full cyborg. Her body almost entirely artificial, her memories possibly fabricated, and the question of whether she has a soul is a philosophical spine of the entire story. She is the most dangerous person in every room she enters. She is also the most lost. The film ends not with a victory, but with a question. The audience walks out asking whether consciousness is real, not whether women can be powerful. That is what a character built correctly does. She makes a story about something larger than herself. In the gaming space, Lara Croft is an explorer, a scholar, and a survivor whose competence is in service of discovery. In comic books, Wonder Woman is a demigod whose strength is in service of peace, not in service of proving a point. In anime, Tsunade from Naruto is one of the 3 most powerful ninja in the world and eventually becomes the leader of her entire village. She watched everyone she loved die and ran away to live a smaller life, then came back anyways. Not because the story assigned her power, but because the situation required it and she chose to stop running. The same audience that would later reject the modern girl boss archetype has argued for years about where she ranks among the greatest characters in the franchise. Her strength is not the interesting part. What she was willing to lose and still keep going is. All of these characters across various medias of art, spanning 5 decades, are beloved by the exact demographic that supposedly cannot handle a strong woman. The premise that this audience rejects strong women is not just wrong, the evidence makes it embarrassing to suggest. However, something far more specific is happening, and the second list is where this mystery deepens. Something begins changing around 2012, not in the stories at first, in the conversations around them. Female characters start arriving in franchise properties that are already exceptional, not becoming exceptional, already. The origin arc, the journey from ordinary to extraordinary that made Ellen Ripley and Sarah Connor feel earned, begins disappearing. Strength stops being about something the story makes the character work for, and starts being about something the character simply arrives with. The audience is told to accept the competence as given rather than shown how it was built. 2019, Captain Marvel enters the MCU as the most powerful being in it. Her power is never in genuine doubt. She does not become something across the film. She discovers she already was something. The film made over $1 billion, but the character never achieves the cultural gravity of other characters who only made a fraction of that. Audiences received her and moved on, rather than carrying her with them.
Look, the film was only successful because it was slapped between the 2 biggest movies of the decade. Then Mr. Kevin Feige tells us it is a must-watch before Endgame. What a load of bullshit!
Another example of this degeneracy is the modern TV show sitcom, which produced a formula so consistent it stops appearing accidental. The male figures, typically the father, is fundamentally incompetent. The mother is patient, intelligent, quietly exhausted. This dynamic repeats across show after show after show. The mother's intelligence exists in contrast to the father's buffoonery. Her strength is only borrowed from his weakness rather than existing independently. The 2016 Ghostbusters reboot, She-Hulk, the Disney Star Wars trilogy, a laundry list of properties where the female characters are positioned not just as capable, but as specifically more capable than the men around them, and where that comparison feels like an intentional purpose of the scene rather than an organic consequence of the story. The audience has noticed, not immediately, but the learning has accumulated, and learned audiences are the most dangerous kind, because once they learn how the sausage is made, they can't help but see it everywhere, including places where it does not belong. And 2024 Furiosa released. It was the prequel to the most celebrated female action film of the decade, a character who earned every inch of her legacy 9 years earlier in Mad Max Fury Road. However, now, the character has arrived into an audience that has spent a decade developing a reflex that hates before the evidence even arrives. The character has not changed. The room she was walking to had, and nobody who changed the room was present to receive the consequences. But it only deepens from here, because there is a corner of this investigation that the conversation almost never reaches, and it contains the most uncomfortable answer of all. Here's the question nobody in this conversation pulls all the way to the end. Let's turn our attention to the Far East and examine the largest growing medium that will soon overtake Hollywood. The same demographic of people that reject modern Western girl boss spends billions every year on anime merchandise featuring powerful women. They have elaborate tiered debates about whether Mikasa Ackerman and Urza Scarlet would win in a fight. They cosplay as 2B, Yurichi, and Makima. The cultural investment is enormous and genuine. This cannot explain the theory that audiences reject contemporary strong female characters. The theory that fits this particular evidence is something more specific and more uncomfortable.
Me has been watching this for decades, and it is driving me absolutely mad, because the answer is so obvious.
Okay, what is the answer?
Me has known the answer for so long, and nobody has bothered to ask me. Nobody ever wants to talk to the skull. I used to be human too, you know.
Well, are you gonna answer?
Me is glad you asked. Finally, it's about time. Sheesh.
Well, I'm waiting.
Oh, were you being serious?
The first layer we must examine for this phenomenon is the wound. Anime girl bosses are almost universally defined by both their power and their cost simultaneously. Mikasa's combat ability and her grief are the same thing. You cannot have one without the other. Urza Scarlet's strength is explained through her childhood trauma. She earned it through suffering so specific the audience understands exactly what it cost her. Maki Zenin is told by her own clan that she has no power and builds it anyway through relentless work against people who want her to fail. 2B from Nier Automata is so powerful she can defeat armies and exists in a state of existential anguish, so total that the game broke players emotionally. The power and the pain are inseparable. The audience receives both at once, and the character's strength feels real because it costs something visible and specific. Western franchise writing in the modern era consistently removed the cost. The female characters arrive already powerful. The wound, if mentioned, is told rather than felt. The audience is informed of the depth, but is not made to experience it.
Oh yeah, man! That's what we see in Aliens and Terminator. Ripley and Sarah Connor was terrified in almost every scene, Winston. She was shaking. She was crying. She kept going anyway. That is why people love her. Not because she was powerful, because she was afraid and refused to stop. That costs something. That means something. A character who is never afraid of anything. What does that tell you about them? That they are brave? No. It tells you they are not real.
Well said, Toombs. The second layer, and this is where the investigation gets genuinely complicated, because some would argue that anime works because the female characters do not diminish the male characters. That argument breaks immediately against the evidence. Bulma makes Vegeta look like an idiot on a regular basis. Nami and Robin routinely outsmart Luffy and Zoro. Asuna from Sword Art Online occasionally makes Kirito seem lesser in her presence. I can list 1,000 more, but the point is to say that these dynamics exist throughout beloved anime, and the audience accepts them completely. So the male diminishment theory does not hold. What actually holds is something more precise. The diminishment tends to be situational, comedic, and mutual rather than ideological or one-directional. When Bulma makes Vegeta look foolish, it is funny because Vegeta is established to be cosmically powerful and cosmically proud in every other context. The audience knows what he is capable of. The comedy comes because the gap between his power and his complete inability to handle his wife seems unnatural. He is not redefined as incompetent. He is caught in a specific situation where his pride becomes absurd. The audience sees this and laughs at the both of them. Let's compare that to the modern sitcom father, where he is just a buffoon in every aspect. He is a character definition rather than a situational gag. He cannot be trusted with decisions. That is who he is. The female character's competence is not a comedy built on mutual respect for what each person actually is. It is a premise built on his inadequacy. The third layer is trust. And this is the one that explains everything the other layers leave unexplained. The audiences who love the anime examples trust these stories. They have spent hundreds of hours with these characters and learned that the story is not trying to make them feel a particular way about gender. When you trust the story, you experience a dynamic as character interaction. When you distrust it, you experience the same dynamic as agenda. The modern girl boss era broke the trust progressively over a decade. And once an audience stops trusting the story's intentions, every choice becomes evidence. Here's where the evidence is building toward. Go back to every beloved character in this investigation and ask one question about all of them that has not been asked yet. What were they fighting for? Ripley fought to survive and then to protect a child she had no obligation to. Sarah Connor fought for her own son, for a future she was handed without consent. Motoko fought to understand whether she was real. I can keep going. None of them were fighting to prove something about themselves. None of them were fighting to make a point about people around them. The strength was always pointed at something external, something that needed protecting, saving, understanding, or solving. Now go back to the rejected characters and ask the same question. The strength in those stories is frequently pointed inward, at the demonstration of the strength itself, or outward at the specific inadequacy of the men around them. That distinction is this whole investigation, and it connects directly back to what our ancestors knew about storytelling and what the modern society has forgotten. Ancient mythology built warrior women for thousands of years. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, patron of Athens. Her strength was in service of civilization, of wisdom, of the city she protected. The Valkyries chose who lived and died in battle. Their power was cosmological, in service of something larger than any individual. Boudica led an army against the Roman Empire because of a specific and documented wrong that had been done to her family. The strength had a direction. It was always pointing at something beyond the demonstration of itself.
Me knew the Valkyries. Professional overlap. Very serious women. Me highly recommend not asking for their runic numbers. Yikes.
You asked a Valkyrie on a date?
Me was a bucking young man back then. At the time, me thought it was funny. Them? Not so much. They nearly gutted me and dragged me from their horses. Good times, me brother.
These are some of the oldest stories ever recorded. We continue to see their effects, whether it's 1970s science fiction or a beloved anime female character who is strong, wounded, and simultaneously purposeful. So write the character for the story she is living in. Give her something to fight for that is not a demonstration of her own strength. Let her pay a cost for what she is. Let her be wrong. Let her be afraid. And keep going anyway. Let her exist in a world where other people are also capable without that diminishing anything about her. Let the audience trust the story enough to receive her honestly. That is just the thing that has always been true about what makes a character feel real. And the audience knows it when they feel it. They also know when they are being handed something that resembles it, but is not quite it. They have always known. The industry just stopped listening. The archetype is not broken. It was broken deliberately by people who found it more useful as a message than as a story. And the audience, the same audience that has been accused of rejecting strong women for a decade, has never stopped loving these characters built correctly. But these are just my observations.
Winston, every time me hear the phrase, me don't need no man, someone around the world immediately dies.
Are we sure those two things are related?
Me is very positive, man.
If you've ever wondered why the most dangerous woman in every story is always the most attractive one, and what it says about the people who cannot stay away, my case file on the femme fatale archetype covers exactly that arrangement. It is on screen.